My parents cut me off for not funding my stepsister. Now, they're begging for my money to save her. I'm a 32-year-old guy who grew up in what I'd call a pretty messed up family dynamic. My parents divorced when I was 10, and not long after, my dad remarried. Sue, my new stepmom, came with her own daughter Liz, who's just a year younger than me. From day one, it was clear that Liz was their main focus. My dad bent over backward to make her feel like she was the most important person in the house, and that never changed. It wasn't long before I figured out that if Liz wanted something, she got it. And if I wanted something, I'd probably better not even ask. At first, I tried to get along with Liz, thinking we were both adjusting to a new situation. But it quickly became clear that she loved being the center of attention. It didn't take much for her to get my dad, and Sue wrapped around her finger. She'd get me in trouble for things she did, like breaking stuff around the house or leaving things lying around. It was always her word against mine, and my dad never once sided with me. She was his new daughter, and he would have done anything to keep her happy. By the time I was a teenager, it was obvious I was on my own. My dad and Sue didn't just play favorites. They were practically raising Liz to believe the world revolved around her. They constantly reminded me that Liz deserved more, that she needed things because she was struggling to adjust, which was just code for whatever Liz wants, she gets. I tried to let it slide and just focused on school, knowing that someday I'd leave that house behind. But things kept getting worse. When I was a senior in college, I was busting my ass to land an internship at a top company, and I'd finally gotten an interview. My dad knew how much it meant to me, but Sue had other plans. She thought the position would be perfect for Liz, and got it in her head that Liz should apply too. I wasn't too worried because Liz didn't even have the qualifications. But somehow, Sue pulled some strings through a family friend, and Liz got the job. Just like that, they handed her the opportunity I'd been working for, and she had no shame about taking it. That was probably one of the first times I felt real resentment towards my dad. I realized he didn't care about my future or my goals. All he cared about was making sure Liz was on top, no matter who he had to step on to get her there. After that, I stopped telling them anything important about my life. When I finally graduated and landed a good job, my dad and Sue were all smiles. Suddenly, they thought I should start giving back to the family. They told me I should contribute to a family fund that would help cover household expenses. I had student loans and was barely getting by, but I agreed out of guilt, thinking maybe it'd go towards bills or something important. It didn't take long to find out that my so-called contributions were mostly being funneled to cover Liz's rent, her car, and even a trip she took with her friends. When I confronted them, they acted like I was being selfish, saying that Liz was struggling and that family supports each other. I told them I'd only keep contributing if I had proof of where the money went, and they immediately got defensive. That was the end of the family fund. Then I met Gracie. She was nothing like my family. She was down to earth, kind, and didn't care about material things. We fell in love quickly, and when I proposed, I felt like I'd finally found a real partner. My family, of course, had other thoughts. Gracie wasn't from a wealthy background, and they didn't think she'd fit in with us. Sue even went as far as suggesting I introduce Liz to some of my successful single friends, saying Liz would make a better match. I didn't take the bait and told them to back off. When we started planning our wedding, things got even worse. I asked my dad if they could help with some of the expenses, and he flat out told me that they were saving up to help Liz buy a house. He didn't see any problem with it. I dropped it, but then they insisted that Liz be a bridesmaid. Gracie, understandably, said no. She barely knew Liz, and the idea of having her at our side on our wedding day didn't sit right with either of us. When I told my parents, my dad flipped out, accusing me of disrespecting the family and choosing Gracie over blood. Sue threw in her usual, "We've done everything for you," guilt trip. That was when I finally snapped. I told them they'd never supported me, that they'd only ever supported Liz, and that this wasn't about family. It was about their obsession with Liz and control. The next day, I got a text from my dad saying, "If you go through with this wedding, don't expect us there and don't bother coming back." They'd been clear. It was Liz or my own life. I didn't cave. Gracie and I had a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by people who actually cared about us. My parents didn't show up, and yeah, it hurt, but it also felt like I'd finally broken free. Years went by without a word from them. Gracie and I built our life together. We bought a modest home, started a small business, and eventually welcomed our daughter, Emma. We were happy, and I'd managed to push most of the resentment behind me. Life was calm, and for once mine. Then, about 6 months ago, I got a string of texts from my dad. He kept it casual at first, asking about Emma and making small talk. I ignored him, but then the messages started getting desperate. Turns out, Liz had been caught embezzling a ton of money from her job. She'd been living way beyond her means, expensive vacations, designer clothes, a luxury car, and her company finally caught on. My parents were in full-blown crisis mode, scrambling to save her life, as they put it. And that's when the begging started. My dad started leaving voicemails about their financial troubles, saying they'd had to put their house up as collateral for Liz's legal fees. Sue sent guilt-tripping emails about how they were one step away from losing everything and how they needed my help to keep the family together. They even suggested I loan them $50,000 to save the family home, because family is all that matters in times like these. At first, I ignored it all, hoping they'd eventually stop. But when the messages didn't let up, I finally agreed to meet them at a diner just to put an end to it. Gracie stayed home with Emma, and I went in fully prepared to tell them to get lost. When I saw them, they looked worn down like they hadn't slept in days. My dad wasted no time. "We need $50,000 to keep the house," he said like I'd just handed over. I shook my head. "You really think I have that kind of money lying around?" Sue's face twisted. She said, "You and Gracie own a business, don't you? And you have a house. You can afford it." So I reminded them of all the times they'd thrown me under the bus for Liz. All the sacrifices I'd made on my own. All the times they made it clear she came first. I reminded them how they'd bailed on my wedding. All because Gracie wasn't good enough for them. I told them I wasn't their backup plan now that their golden child had messed up. My dad looked at me like I was speaking another language. "We did our best for you," he said, trying to play the victim card. "Family sticks together." I was done. I told him my family, Gracie and Emma, comes first. I'm not jeopardizing their future for people who only come to me when they're desperate. As I stood up to leave, Sue muttered, "I hope you can live with yourself after this." I looked her in the eye and said, "I've been doing just fine without you." I thought that would be the end of it, but my dad wasn't ready to let go. He showed up at my house the next week. He'd never visited before, never met Emma, and seeing him on my doorstep, desperate, felt like some kind of twisted joke. He begged me to hear him out, rambling about how the family was falling apart and how Liz's life would be ruined without my help. He even tried to spin it like he was asking for himself and Sue, not Liz. He said, "Do you really want us to lose everything?" I asked him why he didn't sell some of Liz's luxury items. The car, the designer stuff. He just stammered, saying he couldn't do that to her. Even when she'd hit rock bottom, he couldn't bring himself to make her face the consequences. I told him, "If you can't hold Liz accountable, don't expect me to clean up your mess." He looked like I'd slapped him, but I didn't care. I closed the door on him, and that was that. A couple of days later, Sue tried a new tactic, telling me I owed it to Emma to keep the family together. She said Emma would benefit from having her grandparents in her life, that I'd regret cutting ties. That was the last straw. I told her Emma doesn't need family members who only show up when they want something. She deserves better than that. I made it clear that I wouldn't be changing my mind and that we were done. I could practically hear her shock through the phone, like she'd never imagined I'd put my foot down so firmly. But I was done being their fallback option. After that conversation, they finally went silent, and it stayed that way for a while. Part of me thought they'd show up again with some new guilt trip or manipulative plea, but they've kept their distance, maybe realizing there's nothing left to gain. And for once, I feel like I've actually got control over my own life, free from their constant drama. Gracie and I continue to build a life focused on love and respect, with no strings attached. Emma is growing up in a stable, happy home, surrounded by people who genuinely care about her. I'm not naive enough to think my parents or Liz will change, but I've come to terms with that. Their version of family was toxic, built on control and favoritism. And it took me years to realize I didn't have to be a part of it. They made their choices, and I've made mine. I used to think cutting them off would make me feel guilty, but honestly, it's given me a peace I never thought I'd have. For once, I'm living my life for me and the people who actually matter. And that's more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.